Good boys die. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a cold winter night. Snow covered the empty street, leaving only the faint glow of street lights. At the end of the street, a two-bedroom brick house stood alone. There was nothing special about it, except for one terrifying fact. Its owner, George Cadini, had died under mysterious circumstances. George was a good man. He lived simply, worked hard, and had a passion for literature. On the last day of February 2008, George posted a video on YouTube recording himself walking around the house, showing each little corner. The video seemed normal, but there was something hidden inside. I paid $79,000 for this house in 1996. It's a great place. George smiled as the camera panned to the dark living room. His armchair, the big screen TV, the old photos in the shoebox. But if you look closely, you'll see something strange. A shadow, a glimpse in the mirror, a distorted face watching him from behind. A few days later, George disappeared. No one saw him leave the house. No one heard any strange noises. When the police broke in, they found him in his bedroom. His eyes were wide open, his face twisted in terror. His fingers scratched the wooden floor as if he had been running away from something. But the room was empty. The house has been abandoned ever since. But George's YouTube channel continues to post new videos. The footage is dark, with only the sound of an unknown source. Some swear they hear whispers. Help me, it's still here. Anyone who has ventured into the house has disappeared without a trace. But in the middle of the night, if you stand at the door and listen carefully, you can hear a knocking sound from inside. Someone, or something, is still there, waiting. Do you dare to come in? In the darkness of the dark room, only the light from the computer screen illuminated Alex's face. He had been sitting there for hours, reading the news about data breaches and security breaches at major companies. Everything seemed normal, but there was something about it that made him feel creepy. Although he was always careful with his information, always setting strong passwords and using security apps, tonight, a wave of anxiety rose up in his heart. He decided to do a quick Google search. Within seconds, a series of data broker websites popped up. Each one advertised the sale of people's personal information, phone numbers, home addresses, emails, and even social security numbers. Suddenly, a cold thought spread through his mind. Could my information be among them? His heart sank when he saw a notice from one of the big security companies. They said their systems had been breached and millions of users' data had been leaked. The data wasn't just basic information, but also passwords and bank account information. Although the company claimed to be the victim, the reality was that his data was being sold on the dark web, and he had no idea. With a click, Alex discovered a service called Aura, which advertised itself as monitoring the dark web and protecting personal information. But despite his attempts to find peace of mind, the feeling of unease persisted. He wondered, was someone monitoring his bank account? Had someone hacked into the credit accounts he had cared for over the years? It was then that he received an alert from Aura. An email had been stolen, one of his old passwords had been leaked, and was being used on an unknown website. A chill ran down his spine. It was as if darkness was slowly closing in on him, step by step, piece by piece, with no one to protect him from the evil he couldn't see. He rushed to check his accounts, but it was too late. Everything was falling apart. Unusual transactions, strange emails, and notifications from unknown sources began to appear. Personal information he thought was safe was now bait for bad guys. In the meantime, Alex couldn't stop thinking. If the government could ban TikTok for privacy reasons, why couldn't they do more to protect people like him, who were unwittingly being targeted by dark forces online? Does anyone really care about the safety of personal information? Or is it all just a nasty game between the imposters and the intruders? A feeling of helplessness and fear enveloped him. In the darkness, the only sound was the continuous tapping of the keyboard, like a warning, like a sign that a nightmare was about to begin. The dim light from a nightlight hanging high on the wall was enough to create a semi-dark space in the small room. The long, cramped hallway led to two bedrooms, one of which was George's. This room was unremarkable, filled with inanimate objects, as if everything existed only to fill the empty space, without any sign of life or hope. On the right was George's room, where he lived in perpetual solitude. Everything in the room seemed purposeless, from the old coffee table to the books scattered on the floor, one of which was a bright red book called How to Date Younger Women for Men Over 35. The book was a sign of desperation, a reminder that George was trying to chase an unattainable dream, a dream he had never truly understood. What does it feel like to be a 51-year-old man who feels helpless in finding love? Despite having a solid career and a stable job, this room is the answer. An eerie silence, a space where no one shares, no connections, just books that pass by like pages of a failed life history. Don Steele's book, A Relationship Writer, is the only key George can find. A vague theory about improving yourself to attract younger women, although George doesn't really understand how to put theory into practice. And then, in a quiet moment, a request comes from one of Don Steele's course instructors. Make a video of your home. Show us that you can actually create an attractive environment for a woman. George has no choice but to comply. He starts filming, but the space around him becomes lonelier than ever. Everything in the room seems to reflect his own failure. The old armchair, the faded sofa, all are like pieces in the lifeless picture of his life. The awkward camera angles, George's awkward movements only highlight the emptiness in the room and in his own soul. When the camera stops, George realizes that he is not just trying to sell a life that he himself does not believe in. This scene is not just an empty house, but an empty heart, a soul languishing in an inescapable loneliness. Every angle, every expression on his face is a whisper that confirms that he was never truly ready to find love. He was just running away from himself. The dim light from a nightlight hanging high on the wall was enough to create a semi-dark space in the small room. The long, cramped hallway led to two bedrooms, one of which was George's. This room was unremarkable, filled with inanimate objects, as if everything existed only to fill the empty space, without any sign of life or hope. On the right was George's room, where he lived in perpetual solitude. Everything in the room seemed purposeless, from the old coffee table to the books scattered on the floor, one of which was a bright red book called How to Date Younger Women for Men Over 35. The book was a sign of desperation, a reminder that George was trying to chase an unattainable dream, a dream he had never truly understood. What does it feel like to be a 51-year-old man who feels helpless in finding love? Despite having a solid career and a stable job, this room is the answer. An eerie silence, a space where no one shares, no connections, just books that pass by like pages of a failed life history. Don Steele's book, A Relationship Writer, is the only key George can find. A vague theory about improving yourself to attract younger women, although George doesn't really understand how to put theory into practice. And then, in a quiet moment, A request comes from one of Don Steele's course instructors. Make a video of your home. Show us that you can actually create an attractive environment for a woman. George has no choice but to comply. He starts filming, but the space around him becomes lonelier than ever. Everything in the room seems to reflect his own failure. The old armchair, the faded sofa, all are like pieces in the lifeless picture of his life. The awkward camera angles, George's awkward movements only highlight the emptiness in the room and in his own soul. When the camera stops, George realizes that he is not just trying to sell a life that he himself does not believe in. This scene is not just an empty house, but an empty heart, a soul languishing in an inescapable loneliness. Every angle, every expression on his face is a whisper that confirms that he was never truly ready to find love. He was just running away from himself. On December 22, 2008, George felt as if time had passed by, as if nothing else mattered. During the long, dull days, he began to record his dark thoughts in a blog that he wasn't sure if anyone would read. The writings had no purpose other than to leave a trail of a mysterious plan he called the escape plan. Every day he went to the gym and observed young women. They were so beautiful that he felt like they weren't human, but other creatures, easy for him to possess. He remembered the times he stood there looking at them, their healthy bodies, showing no signs of fatigue or worry. They had an inexplicable attraction, making him indulge in strange fantasies of possessing them. One day, he wrote a new post. His plan began to become clearer. Everything was meticulously calculated, but it all left him with a haunting obsession. He described January 6, 2009, at 8:15 p.m. It was the time he believed everything would end, with an inevitable end. "I will do this," he wrote, but the words were filled with confusion and terror. As time passed, George kept thinking about loneliness. He remembered a distant Christmas in 1983 with Pam, someone he had loved. Why was he so unlovable? He had done everything he could: shaven, dressed, showered, and even put on perfume. But rejection still came from 30 million women his age. That was how he saw himself, abandoned by the world. But the day finally came, January 6. George sat in his cold room with an old clock counting down the seconds. He wrote his last words, a prayer for a crazy world, a world in which he could find no place. "Lord, have mercy," he wrote. "I wish I had answers, but I have nothing but pain." His final post seemed to be the end of it, but just hours later, another message appeared, more chilling than anything before. George wrote, "I was a coward. I brought a gun, loaded." The words rang out like a declaration of death. And just before it all ended, he left one last sentence. "It's over." No one knows what really happened that night. Some believe he carried out his plan, while others hope he just stopped strangely. But not long after, George disappeared from his blog. No more updates, only the creepy words he left behind, words that now became traces of a broken soul. Then in April 2009 he reappeared, but this time not with words of pessimism or despair. George's new posts contained greater crisis, darker thoughts. Once again, the world was drawn into the turmoil of his mind, but this time, no one could have predicted what would happen next. George's story is not over yet. Those words, those wordless sounds, still haunt the cyberspace. A broken mind that cannot escape itself, a soul that cannot find a way out, and the world still continues to spin, haunted by unsolved secrets. On July 23, 2009, an ordinary afternoon in a quiet neighborhood in Pennsylvania, I stood by the window, looking out the street and saw a young woman walking out of Bob's house. She looked like a pretty college student, her hair shining in the late afternoon sun. Perhaps she had just spent a pleasant afternoon with Bob, the middle-aged man who lived across the street from me. I couldn't help but wonder about his life, his short-lived and mysterious relationships. But life here was not just about curious glances from the window. This neighborhood had a special character, George Sodini. He was a quiet, introverted man, and almost no one really knew what he was thinking. The neighbors thought George was just a loner, a bit eccentric but not dangerous. Little did they know that his darkest thoughts were stored in his personal blog, where he poured out his resentments, his dissatisfaction with life, and especially with women. On July 28, 2009, George Sodini boarded a Port Authority bus. He took a seat near the window, carrying a duffel bag. As the bus drove, he opened the bag and began rummaging through something inside. A passenger sitting next to him noticed and glanced at it. George seemed to be holding a grenade. The passenger immediately got off the bus at the next stop and called the police. But when the police came and searched, no grenade was found. With no concrete evidence, George was released, and he continued with his plan. On August 3, 2009, he wrote in his blog, "I'm taking off work today and tomorrow to practice my routine and make sure everything is perfect. There's only one chance. I need to focus completely on achieving my goal." Then the fateful day came. On August 4, 2009, George Sodini walked into the La Fitness gym in Bridgeville, Pennsylvania. He carried a duffel bag and walked straight into the women's aerobics room. There were about 30 women working out inside, none of whom noticed his presence. George placed the bag on the floor with a loud bang, then suddenly closed the door and turned off all the lights. Darkness filled the room, and heavy breathing could be heard. A witness later said that at that moment, she sensed something was wrong. And then, the first gunshots rang out. A hail of bullets ripped through the peaceful atmosphere. Screams of panic echoed through the small room. George Sodini, with 2 guns in his hands, fired 52 shots at the women in front of him. None of them had a chance to fight back. Elizabeth Gannon, 49, Jody Billingsley, 38, and Heidi Overmere, 46, died instantly. Many others were wounded, with lifelong physical and mental scars. By the time police arrived on the scene, George Sodini had killed himself, leaving behind a horrific massacre and questions that will never be answered. His blog, his final, somber words, became evidence of a twisted mind, a meticulously planned plan, a tragedy that could have been prevented. But it was too late. That day, George Sodini chose to end his life in the most brutal way possible, with blood and unending pain. The room was bathed in the pale blue light of his computer screen. George sat motionless, his eyes glued to the words on his blog. He had written hundreds of posts, each one filled with resentment and longing. But no one cared. No one looked at him. He gripped the mouse so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "They will pay," he whispered. His voice trembled with excitement. The plan had been laid out long ago, just one final move needed. He opened a dark web page, a forum where people like him shared their twisted thoughts. There, he had told of his loneliness, of how he had been forgotten by the world. But no one responded. No one cared. But tonight would be different. George stood up and pulled open a desk drawer. A shiny blade lay inside. He picked it up, studying the glint of steel against his distorted face. The window was open, the night wind blowing in, carrying whispers, or was it just a hallucination in his mind? His footsteps were light as he left the apartment. The hallway was empty, Only the sound of his footsteps echoed. A young girl had just returned to the apartment next door. She paid no attention to George. She had never paid any attention to him. He moved closer, just for a second. Move! The story of Mark Williams, a parkour-loving YouTuber, is full of ups and downs in his journey to pursue his passion. Although he started his YouTube channel in 2019, at the age of 15, Mark has faced many difficulties and challenges. From the beginning, Mark was eager to build a community and achieve success on YouTube. He chose the nickname This Place for his channel, and his videos are full of adventurous scenes, from jumping from roof to roof, climbing giant abandoned cranes, to running away from security guards and police. Aside from the challenging scenes, Mark is not an easy person in his personal life. Although he really wants to have friends to share and accompany, in reality he feels quite lonely. According to his mother, Mark is trusting and craves friendship, but tends to make friends with the wrong people. This left him feeling left out at times, especially after his brother started appearing less and less in his videos. His brother stopped showing up for shoots as he used to, leaving Mark to do parkour runs alone, which he found lacking and unhappy. However, despite his personal struggles, Mark was determined to continue his content creation. For a long time, his channel seemed to stagnate as he would go for long periods without posting new videos, only to return with promises of regular updates, which often didn't happen. Despite this, Mark didn't give up on his dream of becoming a famous YouTuber. At the end of 2020, he received a ray of hope from a comment from a fan named LS Ashdown, who suggested they collaborate on a video since they both lived in Uckfield. This was exactly what Mark needed, a work companion. Since then, Mark and Lewis have become a creative duo in the parkour community. Not only have they collaborated on videos, but they have also become close friends, experiencing challenging and adventurous moments together. One of their most memorable videos is when they explored an abandoned pub together, where Mark not only made videos but also always cared for Lewis's safety as they climbed on dangerous terrain. Despite finding a reliable companion like Lewis, Mark still faced many challenges in life. As he grew up and started to take care of his life, Mark had to face finding a job and sometimes had to put his passion for YouTube on hold. This made him feel stressed, especially when his body was no longer as flexible as before and he started to experience health problems such as back pain. In a live stream in March 2021, Mark shared about these difficulties. He said he hadn't really returned to parkour since Christmas that year and was feeling tired due to health issues. He wasn't sure if his YouTube channel would continue to grow and if he would continue posting videos or stop altogether. However, Mark wasn't alone this time. Lewis was still there for him, always encouraging and motivating him to continue doing what he loved. Lewis even helped Mark find new locations to shoot videos and work on new projects with him. Mark's story is a testament to perseverance, friendship, and unwavering passion. Despite many challenges and sometimes feeling helpless, he did not give up on his dream. With the support of Lewis and his fan community, Mark kept fighting and hoped that one day his YouTube channel would become a huge success, not only in the field of parkour, but also in connecting with people who share the same passion. The story begins on the dark night of May 29, 2021, when Mark Williams and Lewis Ashdown decided to meet at a small bar in Marsfield. What started out as a fun evening, a few drinks, and a discussion about their next video project quickly turned sour. The alcohol began to cloud their thinking, and while Mark was drunk, Louis felt things going wrong. The two left the bar, but neither of them knew that this would be the last time they would see each other. Mark called his aunt to let her know he was coming home, But before the call ended, Louis assured him that he would get Mark home safely. However, that night, something strange happened. 12 hours passed, and neither of them returned home. Mark's aunt began to worry, and when Mark and Louis still hadn't appeared the next morning, a search began. They were last seen in the Marsfield area, which was filled with dense woods and murky waters, where they may have gotten lost or encountered something that no one could explain. Locals began to whisper about the strange phenomena they had witnessed the following morning. Some claimed to have seen Louis leaving the pub, while others claimed to have seen him at a cinema, as if he had been completely unaware that he was being sought. The police began to investigate and soon found Louis at the home of his friend Liam Hansen. Everything seemed wrong. Louis refused to answer questions about where he and Mark had been, while Louis's friend Liam Hansen was silent and uncooperative during the interrogation. However, when questioned privately, Liam could no longer keep the secret. He began to reveal what really happened that night, and the story he told opened a dark, creepy door. Liam recounted that after they left the bar, the three of them, Mark, Louis, and him, went for a walk down a deserted road. They walked through the woods where the old trees blocked the light of the street lamps, making the space dark and creepy. Suddenly, they heard strange noises coming from behind them, as if someone was following them. Mark, who was already drunk, began to feel nervous, but Louis paid no attention, continuing to walk, as if he was all too familiar with these noises. However, as the three of them entered a more secluded area, they suddenly came across a blurry figure standing at the end of the path. In the thick darkness, no one could see who it was, but a cold and creepy feeling began to spread. Mark and Louis stopped, feeling as if they could not move any further. The figure said nothing, just standing there, staring at them with cold eyes. A strong wind suddenly blew by, and the figure disappeared into thin air. At this moment, a sense of unease enveloped the three of them. Mark no longer had the strength to continue. He collapsed to the ground, his hands grabbing onto the tree branches beside him to try to stand up. But as Louis approached to help, a terrible noise rang out from behind them, as if something heavy was rushing towards them. Not having time to react, the three of them turned around, but the figure appeared again. This time, it was no longer standing still but moving quickly like a ghost towards them. Liam said that when he turned back to look at Mark, his friend was no longer there. Louis was the same. They had disappeared right before his eyes. Liam panicked, not knowing what to do. He could only hear footsteps echoing throughout the forest, but could not determine their direction. In the end, Liam rushed home and did not dare to turn back, but when he arrived, Mark and Louis were completely missing. Liam's story left the police bewildered. Despite a thorough investigation of the forest and surrounding area, there was no trace of Mark and Louis, but the people in that area reported that they had heard strange noises at night, footsteps echoing in the quiet space. But no one was seen. The police continued to search, but all hope seemed to fade. There was definitely something supernatural, or even spooky that night, when Mark and Louis disappeared without a trace. And to this day, that forest is still considered a haunted place, where mysterious figures still lurk in the darkness, waiting for curious footsteps to approach. February 29, 2021, a memorable day not only because of its rarity, but also because it is associated with a terrible mystery. Louis and Mark, two close friends, went missing together, but few expected that this disappearance would hide a bloody and sinister story. It all started on a dark night when Mark and Louis met in a deserted park. Everything seemed normal, but no one knew that this was the moment when Mark's fate was decided. Louis, with a meaningful smile, poured Mark a cocktail, then continued to pour a second, a third. Each drink was stronger than the last, as if he was controlling Mark, making him more and more drunk. Mark didn't realize the danger approaching. When he felt his head starting to spin, he tried to tell Lewis that he had had enough. But Lewis just sneered and continued to pour more wine into his friend's glass. The heavy feeling of intoxication gradually took over Mark's body, and in his drunken haze, he was forced to beg Lewis to stop. But Lewis didn't hesitate. Instead, he continued to deceive Mark that this was a non-alcoholic drink, before silently pouring more wine into his glass. Losing control, Mark tried to call his aunt to let her know that he would be back soon. At this time, Lewis still maintained a terrifying sobriety, smiling as he listened to Mark's call, while continuing to pour alcohol on his friend. Mark had no idea that this call would become the last words he would ever give to anyone. After ending the call, Mark bent down, feeling nauseous. But at that moment, Lewis, in a moment too fast and too cruel, pulled out a large kitchen knife from his pocket. Before Mark could understand what was happening, a sharp knife had pierced his back. Blood flowed out. Mark staggered to his feet, his mouth mumbling to ask Lewis if he had called an ambulance. But the answer he received was a cold laugh. Lewis did not stop. With each stab, he laughed as if he was playing a game. Mark collapsed to the ground, his body losing strength. But no, Lewis was not satisfied with what he had done. He continued to stab Mark's body without stopping until death approached. After the attack ended, Lewis continued to record the scene on his phone. "Look, Liam, this video is proof," Lewis whispered, smiling like a victor. When Liam, Lewis's only remaining friend, saw the gruesome video, he could not believe his eyes. It had happened so fast and so brutally. Liam said that Mark's eyes in the video were the eyes he never wanted to see. Mark's eyes. "They looked straight into my soul," Liam said, his voice trembling. The images he saw haunted him for the rest of his life. Eventually, the video was discovered. When police searched Lewis's phone, they found not one video, but 7 videos nearly an hour long, depicting every gruesome detail of the attack. Lewis had no regrets. He had waited too long, and that night he had carried out the plot he had always wanted. With a guilty motive, Lewis told the police that he simply found Mark a nuisance. He had no deep grudge against his friend. He just wanted to kill someone to satisfy his bloodlust. This was the only reason why Lewis decided to act. However, the police knew that there was something more sinister, a deep hatred that no one could guess. When the case was over, Lewis was sentenced to life in prison, with the condition of parole after 25 years. Mark, the only person in Lewis's life that he could call a friend, could never return. The boy was gone, his body thrown into a cold body of water where it would forever be hidden in the darkness. Mark's mother's warning finally came true. Be careful who you trust, and never let anyone lead you into places you can't trust. Mark trusted Lewis too much, and that trust led to his own cruel death. Today, Mark's case still makes people shudder. Everyone knows that sometimes the best friends are the most dangerous people, and a crime story, even though it ended in prison, continues to haunt those who know it. Joshua Brown, a tech enthusiast and adventurer, started his journey in 2010 by creating a YouTube channel. Initially, he just shared everyday moments, random videos about his life, but soon after, he found a new passion: electric cars, especially Tesla. Believing that self-driving cars are the future of the automotive industry, he started focusing on exploring and sharing the autopilot feature of his Tesla Model S, which he owned since 2015. From the very beginning, he started filming videos about his car. But instead of just focusing on the car, Joshua focused specifically on the autopilot mode, a controversial feature at that time. He wanted to be a pioneer, someone who brought a realistic look at the ability to drive autonomously, a technology that was in its early stages and not widely known. While Joshua's passion and confidence in his car is undeniable, there are details in this journey that gradually take the story from fun to creepy. One of the scariest moments is when he drives with his hands almost never on the wheel, as if he is proving to everyone that Tesla's autopilot can do everything. Despite Tesla's warnings to drivers not to take their hands off the wheel, Joshua finds ways to avoid the car detecting this absence. He even uses his feet to control the sensors, allowing the car to continue moving without warning. His confidence in Tesla's autopilot capabilities was further reinforced by a stressful event on April 5, 2016. While driving on an empty highway, a large truck suddenly swerved into his lane without the driver knowing that Joshua was there. Everything happened so fast, but the Tesla reacted in time, swerving to avoid a catastrophic collision. Joshua recorded a video of the life and death moment and uploaded it to his YouTube channel. The video quickly gained a lot of attention, reaching over 4 million views and even attracting the attention of Elon Musk, who shared the video on Twitter. With his sudden fame, Joshua felt like he had touched success, but no one expected that the price to pay would come so quickly. Just a month after his video went viral, on a sunny day, Joshua continued to drive his Tesla on Highway 27, not knowing that fate would no longer be kind to him. While he felt safe, trusting the autopilot and continuing to record every moment, this car, which had saved him once, became his next nightmare. As Joshua continued to trust the technology he loved, something terrible happened. On a deserted stretch of road, the Tesla self-driving car, while traveling at high speed, failed to react to an emergency situation. Suddenly, the car crashed straight into a barrier wall without any sign of stopping. In just a few seconds, Joshua had no chance to save himself. Death came too quickly and too suddenly. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they discovered that the Tesla was still intact, with no damage to the body, but the driver could not survive. An accident that no one could have expected had happened, even though everyone had previously thought that Tesla was the car of the future, where safety was paramount. Joshua Brown has left this world, but his story continues to be a warning. It reminds everyone of the dangers of over-trusting technology without fully understanding it, and that what is considered safe today can become dangerous in the blink of an eye. This story is not just an accident, but a horrifying lesson about never trusting anything too much, no matter how advanced and safe it is. When it comes to trusting technology, sometimes blind trust can lead to tragedy. At around 4 p.m., as the golden light of the sun illuminated a vast, deserted road, Joshua Brown felt absolutely confident in his Tesla Model S. He had turned on the autopilot mode, as he always did, to enjoy the feeling of relaxation, without having to worry about controlling the car. This mode was not only a new feature, but also a source of pride for Joshua, who had spent a lot of time researching and sharing this technology with the world. Joshua drove with great confidence, his mind completely at ease. The surrounding sounds and the scenery passing by outside the window could not distract him. But he did not know that at this moment, a deadly danger was approaching him. At this moment, his car was approaching an intersection where a giant 18-wheeler was turning left. The road was clearly blocked by the truck, but Joshua, lost in his confidence in the technology of the self-driving car, did not notice. He did not even realize that he was approaching an inevitable collision, and the Tesla did not notice the danger either. The autopilot system had ignored the giant truck that was occupying the entire lane. The sunlight reflected off the body of the tractor-trailer, making it almost invisible to both the Tesla's system and Joshua. The seconds and minutes passed in an eerie silence. Joshua, in his indifference, did not react. The autopilot did not intervene as his car hurtled straight into the stopped truck in front. And then the collision happened. A catastrophic collision so fast and so powerful that no one could react. The Tesla slammed into the truck at full speed, the force of the impact completely tearing the top of the car off. Debris flew everywhere, but the car continued to move as if nothing had happened, at an unabated speed until it crashed into the truck again, coming to an abrupt stop. When rescue workers arrived, there was only panic and fear. In the Tesla, Joshua Brown was no longer breathing. It was a death no one could have predicted. The death of a man who believed in technology so much, but did not realize that technology could sometimes be a traitor. The truck driver could hear nothing but the sound of a movie playing in Joshua's car. Harry Potter, a DVD that many believe Joshua had watched while driving. The story of Joshua's self-driving Tesla quickly became a symbol of innovation, but also a warning. Joshua, the first person to die in a self-driving car accident, wrote a terrifying chapter in the history of technology. While his family and supporters still debate whether watching the movie was actually the cause of his inattention, one thing is clear: the accident raises big questions about safety and dependence on technology. Joshua's death was not only a personal tragedy, but also a shock to the entire auto industry, forcing them to reconsider what had happened. Safety improvements have since been made, but Joshua Brown's death will forever be a warning to all those who believe that technology can completely replace humans. In the darkness of the debris, the Tesla Model S still stands intact as a witness to a tragedy that Joshua himself could not have foreseen.